Text for today is from the Gospel reading, as has been mentioned, but particularly that verse in which Jesus promises that our joy will be full or complete. Overflowing, I think, is a word also used. Shall we pray? Gracious God. Well, that's pretty amazing that you're present here, Creator of the world, in our gathering this morning, present in the waters of baptism. You'll be present later in bread and wine. But you're present equally in your word. Open our hearts and lives to your presence. Amen. It's actually just worth remembering the setting in which we have the words that we heard a few moments ago, and words particularly in regard to that verse that I made reference to, that your joy may be full, overflowing, and experienced in a lavish sort of way. In John's Gospel, there are a number of chapters, 13 to 17. All of those chapters simply contain words from Jesus that he speaks to particularly his disciples in the hours before his arrest and death. It's kind of like his last words to his people. Pretty somber occasion, in which he's got a lot of things to share with them. So he shares them. In that context, we have reference to joy. It's also in this chapter, I think there was a mistake on the screen before where it said chapter 15, 1 to 8. We had 15, 1 to 8 last week, and as was rightfully said, this morning the chapter continued with verse 9, or the reading continued with verse 9. This is the chapter in which Jesus refers to himself as the vine, and you and me, we are the branches. It's in that context of vine and branches, also worth noting when we get to this text. And immediately before the text that we've just heard, we have these words where Jesus says, "My Father is glorified by this, that you bear much fruit." So just think of the scene again. Just before his death. Disciples know something's going to happen. It's all very serious and tense. And he speaks about being the vine. They are branches, and they are to bear fruit. And now in our text, we have the fruit mentioned 9 times. The fruit, if we want to have one word to cover the fruit that we are to bear as disciples or as branches of the vine, the fruit is love. Love. Oh, a most overused and sometimes underperformed love. What is love? We'll all come to that with our understandings. Mother Teresa once said that love is giving until it hurts. That's pretty challenging. Giving until it hurts. Another more recent definition I've come across that I like as well. Love is when someone gets their ego out of the way for another. That's a very sort of 2018-ish kind of definition. We live in a world of huge egos. It's no longer, John and I went to the football last night. It's me and John went. It's me first. And in so many ways, we have this reflected in our media as well. That it's a world in which it's all about me. And the advertisers tell us that over and over. It's all about you. You're number one. Love is when someone gets their ego out of the way for another person. That's challenging. And now Jesus says, I command you to love each other the same way that I love you. He certainly put his ego out of the way for us on the cross. That's what it stands for. Selflessness. I command you to love each other. Now, I've got a problem with that on first looking at that word. I mean, can you command someone to love someone? You can command the service that comes out of love, perhaps, but to actually command love, we don't. We talk about falling in love, don't we? We talk about love being some spontaneous thing that arises within us, but to command someone to love seems oxymoron in some ways. And that's, I think, fair enough to question it in that sense. The point, though, is to remember in this context is that Jesus is speaking these words to the insiders, or he's speaking of these words to the branches who are connected to the vine. I'm the vine, you are the branches, love one another. So it's not love one another so that you'll be my friends. It's not you're to love people so that you'll be, God will think you're pretty good. It's not loving other people so that God approves of our life or our actions. No, not at all. We are already in that relationship with him. And it's within that relationship that he can remind us, in fact, command us to love one another as he has loved and as he loves us. And I've said these things to you, he says now, so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. So here we have this great reference to joy in the midst of this demanding aspect of love, in the midst of this context in which people have got anything but love on their minds at this stage. The disciples are very anxious as to what's going to happen. And maybe there are all sorts of things happening in our own lives, in your lives, that find that it seems that joy just doesn't kind of ring, asking people to rejoice. I mean, just before the service, I heard of somebody I didn't know of who's also suffering from cancer. And now this morning we say, rejoice. Let your joy overflow. Jesus has come and spoken his word to us so that we will have joy. Joy full, actually. Joy in abundance. Joy overflowing. So there's a tension here. Joy that will be complete and overflowing in abundance in our world and in our society, in which, if you read the papers or hear the news, it seems joy hardly fits what's going on around us in many ways. Or in our own personal lives, there can be all sorts of reasons as well to find that joy seems to be almost a contradiction to what's really happening for us. It's interesting that joy and grace in the scriptures share the same root word. The same Greek word is used, that part of it at least, for the words joy and for the words grace. I find that really interesting and fascinating, and in fact pretty wonderful that joy and grace are joined together. And in fact, I would say when I hear that and when that rings true for me, I could say, wow, joy in God's grace. Is there a better motivation than joy that this God will love me unconditionally, whatever my circumstances? And remember, it was also reported that Jesus, in the book of Hebrews, we have the words, Jesus went the way of the cross because of the joy that was before him. The cross and joy actually somehow or other seem to go together. This is a deep, deep kind of joy that we can experience in the midst of all those other things that seem to be running against us. But joy and grace. God's unconditional acceptance of us. God's total love and mercy enveloping us no matter what. Just enables us to have a sense of joy deep down that not even the world can take away from us. Joy in God's grace. Wow. Amen. Oh God, let it be. Let it be true for us. Gathered here with a myriad of different things and circumstances in our lives. Somehow your grace would continue to touch us and therefore enable us to experience deep, deep down that joy which no one can and take from us. Amen.